What's the one thing costing you thousands of dollars every year that you can't even see? It's not inflation, taxes, or even those sneaky subscription services. It's actually happening right between your ears. The average person loses over $10,000 annually to psychological money blocks without ever realizing it. In the next few minutes, I'll show you how your brain has been tricking you into staying broke and exactly how to rewire it for wealth. This isn't about budgeting tips or investment strategies. It's about the 80% of wealth building that nobody talks about. The invisible enemy, complexity aversion. Did you know 48% of Americans don't invest a single dollar in the stock market? The reason might shock you. It's not that they're broke. It's not that they don't want to build wealth. It's something psychologists call complexity aversion, and it's the invisible enemy silently robbing millions of their financial future. Complexity aversion is that feeling in your gut when you hear terms like dividend yields or market capitalization, and your brain immediately says, nope, too complicated, I'm out. It's that mental block that convinces you investing is some mysterious world only accessible to math geniuses and Wall Street insiders. But here's where it gets scary. While you're avoiding investing because it seems too complex, your money is sitting in a savings account earning what, 0.5% interest? Meanwhile, inflation is chomping away at your purchasing power at 2 to 3% annually in normal times. And we've seen it go much higher recently. Let's put some real numbers on this mental block. If you have $10,000 sitting in a typical savings account, instead of being invested in a simple market index fund, which historically returns about 7 to 10% annually, you're losing over $4,000 every single year. That's not a typo. Your fear of complexity is costing you thousands of dollars you don't even realize you're losing. Our brains evolved to conserve energy and avoid complicated challenges. This made perfect sense when we were hunter-gatherers. Why waste precious calories figuring out complex problems when there are berries to pick? But in today's financial landscape, this same brain wiring is sabotaging your wealth. Your prehistoric brain is protecting you from the danger of complexity, while simultaneously guaranteeing you'll struggle financially in the future. Take Mike, for example. Mike graduated college at 22 and landed a decent job making $45,000. He knew he should probably invest some money, but every time he tried to learn about it, he felt overwhelmed. The different account types confused him. The investment options seemed endless. He'd start researching and quickly abandon it, thinking, I'll figure this out later when I have more time. Later turned into 10 years. For a decade, Mike kept all his savings in a basic checking account, earning essentially zero interest. Finally, at 32, he befriended a coworker who explained investing in simple terms, and Mike finally got started with a basic index fund. But that decade of delay? It cost Mike over $100,000 in potential wealth. If he had invested just $300 a month from age 22 to 32 with an average 8% return, he would have accumulated around $58,000. But because of his complexity aversion, that money never had the chance to compound for another 30-plus years until retirement. By age 65, that difference balloons to over $550,000 in lost wealth potential. And Mike isn't alone. Research from the Financial Industry Regulatory Authority shows that 2 out of 3 Americans would fail a basic financial literacy test. This knowledge gap creates the perfect breeding ground for complexity aversion. When something seems both important and incomprehensible, our natural response is avoidance. Think about your own situation. How many times have you thought about investing, only to put it off because it seemed too complicated? How many books or articles have you started reading, only to abandon them when the terminology got too dense? How many YouTube videos have you watched that left you more confused than when you started? The real tragedy is that the barrier isn't nearly as high as most people think. The financial industry benefits from making investing seem complex. It justifies their high fees and expert status. But the truth? The most successful investment strategy is often the simplest one. Warren Buffett, arguably the greatest investor of all time, has repeatedly advised average Americans to simply invest in low-cost index funds. In fact, in his will, he's instructed the trustee for his wife's inheritance, to put 90% of her money in, you guessed it, a simple S&P 500 index fund. Not complicated trading strategies, not exotic investments, just a basic index fund that anyone can access. So, how do you break through this mental block that's potentially costing you hundreds of thousands of dollars over your lifetime? The solution is what I call the one thing technique. Instead of trying to understand the entire financial universe at once, identify just one simple action to take. For most people, that one thing should be opening an index fund account and setting up an automatic monthly contribution. That's it. You don't need to understand option trading. You don't need to analyze company balance sheets. You don't need to predict market movements. You just need to take that single step. For example, you could open an account with Vanguard, Fidelity, or another reputable investment company. Choose their total stock market index fund. Set up an automatic transfer for whatever amount you can afford every month, even if it's just $50 or $100. Then, do nothing else. Let time and compound interest work their magic. This one-thing approach bypasses your brain's complexity aversion by shrinking the challenge down to a manageable size. It's like telling someone who's overwhelmed by the idea of getting in shape that they just need to put on their sneakers and walk for 5 minutes. Anyone can handle 5 minutes, and once they're walking, they'll likely continue for longer. Similarly, once you've set up that index fund, you might find yourself curious to learn more about investing. But even if you don't, you've already taken the most important step. You've already put yourself ahead of nearly half of Americans who remain completely uninvested. Remember, every day you let complexity aversion win is another day your money isn't working for you. It's another day of letting inflation silently steal your purchasing power. It's another day of missing out on the miracle of compound returns. The beauty of breaking through this mental block is that it doesn't just impact your finances. It changes how you see yourself. You transform from someone who's intimidated by financial concepts to someone who takes action despite not having all the answers. That mindset shift can impact every area of your life. The wealth killer, scarcity mindset. That mindset shift can ripple through every part of your life. But there's another psychological trap that might be keeping you financially stuck, no matter how much you earn. Ever wondered why 70% of lottery winners end up broke within a few years? The answer lies in what psychologists call a scarcity mindset. And brain scans show it's changing your neural pathways right now. A scarcity mindset is that persistent feeling that there's never enough money, resources, or opportunities to go around. It's that voice in your head saying, I can't afford that. Money is hard to come by. Or, I need to hold on to every penny because who knows when I'll get more. And here's the kicker. This mindset affects you whether you make $30,000 a year or $300,000. The problem is that your brain doesn't just think these thoughts, it acts on them. And that's where things get really interesting. When you operate from scarcity, you make decisions that actually create more scarcity in your life. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy that keeps you financially stuck. Let me blow your mind for a second. Brain imaging studies have revealed that scarcity thinking literally changes your neural pathways. When your brain is in scarcity mode, it physically rewires itself, affecting your decision-making abilities in ways you don't even realize. Your brain becomes hyper-focused on immediate threats and short-term thinking, shutting down the parts responsible for long-term planning and creative problem-solving. This rewiring leads to some seriously self-sabotaging financial behaviors. For one, people with scarcity mindsets tend to engage in financial hoarding, keeping their money in low-interest accounts where inflation eats away at its value year after year. They avoid smart financial risks out of fear, missing opportunities that could multiply their wealth. And when opportunities do arise, they often experience such intense FOMO, fear of missing out, that they make impulsive decisions like panic buying or jumping on trendy investments without proper research. Here's what will really make you sit up. Research shows that people with a scarcity mindset earn 40% less over their lifetime compared to those with an abundance mindset. That's not a typo, 40% less. This isn't just about feeling better about money. It's about the very real impact these thoughts have on your financial reality. Let me tell you about Jennifer, a client of mine who was stuck in a brutal scarcity cycle. Jennifer made a good salary as a marketing manager, over $80,000 a year, but she was constantly stressed about money. She kept her savings in a basic checking account because she was terrified of losing it. Investment opportunities? Too risky. Asking for a raise? Too scary. Starting a side business? Not enough time or resources. Her scarcity mindset was costing her thousands every year. But the real cost was to her well-being. Constant anxiety, relationship tension with her partner over money, decisions, and a growing resentment toward her own financial situation. The turning point came when Jennifer realized her scarcity mindset wasn't just a set of beliefs. It was a lens through which she viewed every financial opportunity. And that lens was distorting reality. She didn't just have financial problems, she had a perception problem. With guidance, Jennifer began shifting from scarcity to abundance thinking. Instead of focusing on what she lacked, she started noticing the resources and opportunities already available to her. Instead of asking, "Can I afford this?" she began asking, "Is this worth the value it provides?" It was a subtle shift, but the results were dramatic. Within 8 months, Jennifer had negotiated a 15% raise, something she'd never have attempted before, moved her emergency fund to a high-yield savings account, and started investing in index funds. But the most significant change wasn't in her bank account, it was in her relationship with money. The constant anxiety was replaced with confidence and clarity. Licensed mental health therapist Tammy Thomas explains that a scarcity mindset can persist even when you're financially secure, because it's often driven by unresolved emotional issues from childhood. Many of us form our earliest money beliefs before we're even 7 years old, and those beliefs can stay with us for decades, regardless of our actual financial situation. So how do you break free from this wealth-killing mindset? The good news is that if your brain can be wired for scarcity, it can also be rewired for abundance. Financial psychologists have developed powerful techniques to transform your relationship with money at the neural level. One of the most effective methods is what I call the abundance journal technique. Each day, take 5 minutes to record the financial opportunities and resources that crossed your path. Maybe a friend mentioned a side hustle, you read about a new investment opportunity, or you simply noticed you had enough money to buy lunch without stress. Writing these down forces your brain to start recognizing abundance rather than fixating on scarcity. Additionally, practicing gratitude for what you do have activates different neural pathways than focusing on what you lack. And reframing negative thoughts about money, challenging statements like, "I'll never have enough," and replacing them with, "I'm learning to manage my resources effectively," can gradually transform your financial psychology. This isn't about positive thinking or ignoring real financial challenges. It's about breaking a thought pattern that's literally making you poorer. Remember, with a scarcity mindset, even if you win the lottery, you're still likely to end up broke. With an abundance mindset, even modest resources can grow into significant wealth over time. The shift from scarcity to abundance thinking doesn't happen overnight. Like Jennifer, you'll need to consciously practice recognizing opportunities instead of just threats, possibilities instead of just limitations. But each time you catch yourself in scarcity thinking and pivot to abundance, you're literally rewiring your brain for wealth. Mindfulness and challenging negative thought patterns are essential steps in managing the anxiety that comes with a scarcity mindset. When you feel that financial panic rising, pause and ask yourself, is this fear based on current reality, or is it my scarcity programming talking? This simple awareness can interrupt the cycle before it leads to poor financial decisions. The emotional money trap. Now that you're aware of how scarcity thinking affects your financial decisions, let's talk about something that might be even more powerful: your emotional relationship with money. What if I told you your brain processes financial decisions in the same region it handles heartbreak and joy? The $1,800 most people waste annually on emotional purchases isn't just poor budgeting, it's your brain's emotional centers literally hijacking your wallet. When you make financial decisions, you might think you're being logical, But brain imaging research tells a completely different story. Your financial choices are primarily processed in the limbic system, the emotional command center of your brain, not in the logical prefrontal cortex, where you solve math problems. This explains why you might know exactly what you should do with your money, but still find yourself making completely different choices in the moment. Ever walked into a store for one item and walked out with 5? Or found yourself splurging on something expensive after a stressful day at work? That's your emotional brain overriding your logical one. What's really happening is that your brain is using purchases as a form of emotional medication. Had a terrible meeting with your boss? That new pair of shoes might temporarily boost your mood. Feeling lonely after scrolling through social media? That late-night online shopping spree creates a brief dopamine hit that makes you feel better, at least until the credit card bill arrives. This isn't just occasional behavior. For many people, it becomes a consistent pattern that drains their finances. The research is eye-opening. The average person spends approximately $1,800 every year on purchases that are purely emotional, things they later regret buying. That's not just a small financial leak, it's a massive hole in your financial boat. The real danger lies in what scientists call the emotional spending cycle. It works like this. First, you experience a negative emotion like stress, loneliness, or boredom. Then, you make an impulse purchase to relieve that feeling. For a short time, you feel better. Shopping actually triggers dopamine release, similar to what happens when you eat good food or have positive social interactions. But then comes the guilt, especially when you realize you've spent money you didn't plan to spend. And ironically, that guilt becomes another negative emotion, which can trigger the cycle all over again. It's particularly insidious because your brain quickly learns that shopping is a reliable way to feel better fast. Before you know it, this becomes your go-to coping mechanism for emotional discomfort. Had a bad day? Buy something. Feeling inadequate? Buy something. Bored? Buy something. It's like your brain has found a shortcut to feeling good, and it doesn't want to give it up, even though it's destroying your financial health. Let me give you an example. After a particularly stressful project deadline, you might find yourself browsing online stores just to look. Before you know it, you've ordered $200 worth of items you don't need. The moment you click purchase, you get that little hit of satisfaction. But a few days later, when the packages arrive, you're left wondering why you thought you needed any of it. And now you're stuck with both the items and the credit card bill. What makes this cycle so dangerous is that it's not just a financial problem, it's a psychological dependence. Just like any other coping mechanism, emotional spending creates a reinforced neural pathway in your brain. Each time you use shopping to make yourself feel better, that pathway gets stronger. Eventually, your brain automatically reaches for this solution whenever you feel bad, without you even consciously deciding to do it. This creates a double drain on your finances. First, there's the direct cost of the unnecessary purchases, but there's also the opportunity cost. All that money could have been invested, used to pay down debt, or saved for something that would bring you real, lasting satisfaction instead of just a momentary mood boost. The cycle is particularly damaging because it often leads to credit card debt. When you're making purchases based on emotional needs rather than financial reality, it's easy to spend more than you have. Before you know it, you're paying 18% interest on items that gave you maybe 18 minutes of happiness. So how do you break this emotional spending cycle? The first step is building what financial psychologists call financial emotional intelligence, the ability to recognize the emotional triggers that lead to poor money decisions. Start by becoming aware of the connection between your emotions and your spending impulses. Next time you feel the urge to buy something unplanned, pause and ask yourself, what am I feeling right now? Am I trying to buy this thing or am I trying to buy a feeling? One of the most effective techniques to break the cycle is implementing the 24-hour rule. Here's how it works. Whenever you feel the impulse to make an unplanned purchase over a certain amount, say $50 or $100, force yourself to wait 24 hours before buying it. Don't put it in your cart, don't save it for later. Just walk away or close the browser tab completely. This cooling off period creates a crucial space between the emotional impulse and the financial action. What's fascinating is that research shows that after 24 hours, the emotional charge that triggered the desire to purchase has usually dissipated. When you revisit the potential purchase a day later, you're able to evaluate it with your logical brain instead of your emotional one. I've seen people reduce their impulse spending by over 70% just by implementing this one rule. It's simple but incredibly powerful because it directly interrupts the cycle at its most vulnerable point, the moment between feeling the emotion and making the purchase. Another effective strategy is to create specific emotional outlets that don't cost money. If stress shopping is your go-to relief valve, intentionally develop alternative stress relievers like exercise, meditation, or calling a friend. The key is recognizing that the problem isn't that you feel emotions, it's that you've trained your brain to soothe those emotions with spending. Some people find it helpful to maintain emotional spending journal, where they record not just what they bought, but how they were feeling when they bought it. Over time, patterns emerge that can help you identify your specific emotional spending triggers. Maybe you shop when you're bored, stressed, or lonely. Once you know your pattern, you can develop targeted strategies to break it. What makes this approach so powerful is that you're not just addressing the financial symptom, you're addressing the emotional root cause. Rather than beating yourself up for lack of willpower or budgeting skills, loss aversion, why good investors make bad decisions. Developing emotional intelligence with your finances is powerful, but there's an insidious psychological force that might be costing you far more than emotional spending ever could. Have you ever noticed that losing $500 in the stock market feels significantly worse than the pleasure you get from gaining $500? This asymmetrical reaction isn't just uncomfortable, it's literally rewiring your brain to make wealth-destroying decisions that could be costing you hundreds of thousands of dollars over your lifetime. This phenomenon has a name: loss aversion. It's a psychological principle where we feel the pain of losses about twice as intensely as the pleasure of equivalent gains. And while that might have helped our ancestors survive by avoiding risky situations, it's absolutely devastating to your investment returns. Let me ask you a question. If you're holding two stocks, one that's up 15% and another that's down 50%, which one are you more likely to sell when you need cash? If you're like most people, you'll quickly sell the winner while holding on to the loser, hoping it will come back. This seemingly innocent decision, repeated over time, can absolutely wreck your long-term wealth. Behavioral finance experts call this the disposition effect, where investors are prone to sell winning investments too early while stubbornly holding on to losing investments. This isn't just a small quirk in your financial behavior. It's a wealth-destroying pattern that research shows can cost the average investor between 4 to 6% in annual returns. Let's put that in perspective. Say you have a $100,000 portfolio. That 5% loss aversion penalty means you're potentially sacrificing $5,000 every single year. Over a 30-year investment horizon, that doesn't just add up to $150,000. Because of the compounding effect, you could be looking at missing out on over $400,000 in retirement savings, all because your brain is hardwired to avoid the temporary emotional discomfort of accepting a loss. What makes loss aversion so dangerous is that it feels like prudent investing. When you hold on to a losing stock, you tell yourself you're being patient. It's not a loss until I sell, you rationalize. But what you're actually doing is allowing psychological comfort to override mathematical reality. Think about it. When you're deciding whether to hold or sell an investment, the only thing that should matter is its future potential, not how much you paid for it. The market doesn't care about your purchase price or your feelings. Yet, loss aversion tricks us into making decisions based on our emotional attachment to the original purchase price rather than objective analysis. Here's where things get really interesting. This bias doesn't just affect active traders, it influences even the most disciplined investors. During market downturns, loss aversion is what makes your finger hover anxiously over the sell everything button. It's what causes perfectly rational people to panic sell at the bottom of a market crash, locking in devastating losses instead of riding out the volatility. Tate Duryea, CEO of Turbine Capital, observes this phenomenon regularly, noting that loss aversion is certainly a factor when we see investors hold onto perceived financial safety of 401ks and mutual funds while shying away from diversification. This highlights how our fear of loss prevents us from making potentially beneficial moves with our investments, keeping us locked in suboptimal strategies. Loss aversion also creates decision paralysis. When faced with multiple investment options, many people become so afraid of making the wrong choice and experiencing loss that they make no choice at all. They leave money sitting in cash, earning minimal interest while inflation steadily erodes its purchasing power. The fear of making a mistake becomes more powerful than the desire for growth. The psychological impact runs deeper than just our investment decisions. Loss aversion actually creates a feedback loop in our brains. Each time we give into it by selling winners too early or holding losers too long, we reinforce these neural pathways. Over time, we develop almost instinctual responses to market movements that work directly against our financial interests. So how do we fight against this hardwired bias? The answer isn't to try harder or just be more logical. Your brain is literally working against you here. Instead, you need to create systems that bypass your emotional decision-making entirely. Enter the investment rules technique, creating predetermined rules for buying and selling that take emotion out of the equation. This approach is surprisingly simple, yet remarkably effective. Before you even make an investment, you decide exactly under what conditions you'll sell it, both on the upside and downside. For example, you might create a rule that says, I will sell 50% of any position that gains 30%, and I will cut any position that drops 15% from my purchase price, no exceptions. These rules need to be written down and committed to before you make the investment, when you're thinking clearly and rationally. The power of this approach is that when market volatility hits and your emotions are running high, you don't have to make a decision in the heat of the moment. You simply follow your predetermined rules. No emotion, no second guessing, no rationalizing why this time is different. Modern technology makes implementing these rules even easier. Automated investing tools and robo-advisors can help you bypass emotional biases entirely by providing data-driven advice based on your personal risk tolerance and financial goals. These platforms can execute your investment rules automatically, ensuring decisions are based on objective data rather than emotional responses. Another effective strategy is to reframe how you think about investment losses. Instead of viewing them as failures, train yourself to see them as valuable information that helps refine your investment strategy. Every investment, whether it succeeds or fails, provides data that can improve your future decisions. You can also combat loss aversion by creating a well-diversified portfolio from the start. When you spread your investments across different asset classes, sectors, and geographies, no single losing position can trigger the full force of your loss aversion. This makes it psychologically easier to follow your investment rules even when individual positions aren't performing well. Regular portfolio reviews, conducted on a schedule rather than in response to market movements, also help minimize the impact of loss aversion. By systematically evaluating your investments at predetermined intervals, you create space for rational decision-making away from the emotional triggers of daily market fluctuations. Perhaps most importantly, educate yourself about the true mathematics of investing. Understanding concepts like expected value and probability can help counteract the emotional pull of loss aversion. When you recognize that temporary losses are a natural and necessary part of long-term wealth building, you become less likely to make wealth-destroying decisions based on short-term discomfort. The procrastination tax. While understanding investment math can transform your decision-making, there's a silent wealth killer that operates in the background of your financial life. What if I told you that waiting just 5 years to start investing costs the average person over $100,000 in retirement savings? This invisible procrastination tax affects nearly 68% of Americans, and unlike other financial mistakes, This one compounds silently every single day you delay. The procrastination tax isn't some official government levy that shows up on your tax return. It's the opportunity cost that accumulates when you put off important financial actions. Think about it. Every month you delay starting your investment plan, you're essentially writing a check to your future self that bounces. And the worst part? Unlike actual taxes, this one grows exponentially larger the longer you wait. What makes this tax especially dangerous is how it combines with complexity aversion. When financial tasks seem overwhelming, our natural response is to put them off until tomorrow. But tomorrow becomes next week, next month, and suddenly, 5 years have passed. All while the invisible meter keeps running. Let me break down the math for you. When you delay investing for just 5 years, the compounding effect creates a massive gap in your final wealth. This isn't about a few hundred or even a few $1,000s. We're talking about potentially sacrificing 6 figures of your retirement savings. Money that could have funded years of your retirement or helped you achieve financial independence earlier. What's fascinating is that procrastination isn't simply laziness, as many people assume. Financial psychologists have discovered it's actually a sophisticated psychological response to discomfort and uncertainty. Your brain is literally trying to protect you from the stress of making complex decisions by pushing them into the future. The problem is, your brain's short-term protection mechanism creates a much bigger, long-term problem. When you encounter financial decisions that seem overwhelming, your brain registers similar stress signals as when facing physical danger. This triggers your avoidance response, a psychological self-preservation mechanism that worked great for our ancestors avoiding predators, but fails miserably when applied to modern financial planning. Fear plays a major role in this process. Many people procrastinate on financial tasks because they're afraid of making mistakes or feeling foolish. This fear of looking incompetent creates a powerful psychological barrier that keeps nearly 7 out of 10 Americans regularly postponing financial tasks they know are critically important. Let me share a case study that illustrates this perfectly. Consider 2 siblings, Emma and Michael. Both graduated college and started earning similar salaries. Emma started investing $300 monthly at age 25, while Michael waited until 35 to begin the exact same investment plan. By retirement at 65, Emma's early start resulted in an additional $600,000 in retirement savings compared to Michael, despite only investing $36,000 more in principal. That $600,000 difference represents Michael's procrastination tax. And remember, both siblings invested the exact same monthly amount. The only difference was when they started. This dramatic outcome isn't due to Emma being smarter or earning more. It's simply the mathematical reality of compound interest working over time. What's particularly tragic about this tax is that it hits hardest those who can least afford it. People with lower incomes or higher financial stress are more likely to procrastinate on financial decisions precisely because the pressure feels too overwhelming. This creates a vicious cycle where those who most need the benefits of compound growth are the least likely to capture them. The good news? Unlike actual taxes, you can completely eliminate the procrastination tax with some simple psychological techniques. Financial advisors who specialize in behavioral economics have developed practical strategies to overcome this costly mental block. One of the most effective approaches is breaking down financial tasks into smaller, actionable steps. When a task feels overwhelming, your brain's procrastination response kicks in. But by dividing that same task into bite-sized pieces, you can bypass this psychological barrier completely. Setting specific deadlines is another powerful technique. Vague intentions like, "I should start investing someday," practically guarantee procrastination. But when you mark a specific date on your calendar and tell someone else about your commitment, you create accountability that counteracts your brain's tendency to delay. Perhaps the most practical technique is what financial behavior experts call the 5-minute rule. This simple approach involves committing to take just 5 minutes of financial action daily. The beauty of this method is that it acknowledges and works with your brain's resistance, rather than fighting against it. The 5-minute rule works because it eliminates the psychological barrier to getting started. Most procrastination happens before you begin a task, not while you're doing it. By committing to just 5 minutes, you trick your brain into taking that crucial first step. And once you've started, you'll often find yourself continuing beyond the initial 5 minutes. What might a 5-minute financial action look like? It could be downloading a budgeting app, setting up automatic transfers to a savings account, or even just gathering the documents you need to open an investment account. These small actions may seem insignificant, but they create momentum that can overcome even the strongest procrastination tendencies. Remember that each day you implement the 5-minute rule, you're not just making a tiny bit of progress. You're actually rewiring your brain's response to financial tasks. Over time, these small actions build a psychological pathway that makes future financial decisions less intimidating and procrastination less likely. The financial industry has begun recognizing the enormous impact of procrastination, leading to the development of various tools designed to counter this tendency. Automated investing platforms, scheduled financial check-ins, and simplified onboarding processes all aim to reduce the friction that leads to postponed action. Like any psychological habit, overcoming financial procrastination takes consistent practice. You might still occasionally put off important money tasks, but with awareness and the right techniques, you can dramatically reduce how often this happens, and save yourself thousands in the process. The comparison trap. Financial procrastination might cost you thousands, but did you know there's an invisible mental trap that makes even high earners feel perpetually broke? Ever wonder why someone making a 6-figure salary can feel just as financially stressed as someone earning half as much? The answer lies in what psychologists call social comparison bias. And in today's social media-dominated world, this psychological trap has become a wealth-destroying machine that affects virtually everyone with a smartphone. Social comparison bias is that nagging tendency to measure your financial success against others instead of your own personal goals and values. It's the voice in your head that whispers, "Not enough," when you see your college friend's vacation photos from the Maldives or your neighbor's brand new Tesla in the driveway. And unlike other psychological traps we've discussed, this one has been supercharged by technology. Every time you open Instagram, Facebook, or TikTok, you're bombarded with carefully curated financial highlight reels that create a completely distorted picture of what normal spending looks like. That influencer showing off their luxury apartment? They're not showing you the mountain of debt financing that lifestyle, your friends' lavish wedding photos. You're not seeing the financial stress they're experiencing behind the scenes. What makes this trap so dangerous is how it operates regardless of your actual income level. Think about it. Have you ever received a significant raise or bonus, felt amazing for about 2 weeks, then somehow found yourself feeling financially stressed again despite having more money? That's social comparison at work. As your income increases, you typically upgrade your social circles and consumption habits, which exposes you to even more expensive lifestyles and possessions to compare yourself against. This creates what financial psychologists call a moving target of enough, a constantly shifting finish line that prevents you from ever feeling financially satisfied. You get a promotion and move to a nicer neighborhood, but now all your neighbors have nicer cars. You upgrade your wardrobe, but now you're following fashion influencers who make your new clothes look outdated. The goalposts keep moving and your satisfaction keeps diminishing. The most disturbing aspect of this comparison trap is how directly it impacts your financial behavior. Research has found that individuals who frequently compare themselves financially to others are 3 times more likely to be in debt. When you're constantly trying to keep up with the financial Joneses, you're far more likely to stretch beyond your means, rely on credit cards, and prioritize status purchases over smart financial moves like investing or building emergency savings. This leads to what economists call lifestyle inflation, where your spending automatically rises to match your income, or worse, exceeds it. Got a 10% raise? Instead of saving that additional money, most people unconsciously increase their spending by about the same percentage to maintain their relative position compared to their peers. This is why so many high-income professionals still live paycheck to paycheck despite earning six figures. The social comparison trap even defies basic economic logic. Studies on happiness and income have revealed what researchers call the relative income paradox. When given the choice in experimental settings, most people would actually prefer earning $50,000 when everyone around them makes $25,000, rather than earning $100,000 when everyone around them makes $200,000. Think about that for a moment. People would rather have half as much money in absolute terms just to feel comparatively better off than their peers. This isn't just fascinating psychology, it has devastating real-world consequences. I recently worked with a client named Alex, who earned over $175,000 annually but felt constantly financially stressed. When we analyzed his spending patterns, we discovered he was spending nearly 40% of his after-tax income on status purchases that aligned with what he thought his professional peers expected: an expensive car lease, luxury apartment, designer clothes, and high-end restaurants. Meanwhile, his retirement accounts were practically empty, and he had less than a month's expenses in emergency savings. The real problem wasn't his spending power. It was that he had allowed social comparison to dictate his financial priorities rather than his authentic values. When we dug deeper, Alex realized he actually valued travel experiences and eventually starting his own business much more than impressing colleagues with material possessions. His spending was completely misaligned with what truly mattered to him. So how do you break free from this invisible trap that's draining your bank account? Financial psychologists recommend conducting what's called a financial values audit. This is a process of identifying your authentic financial priorities separate from external influences. The key questions to ask yourself: 1. If no one else would ever know about your purchases or financial situation, what would you actually spend money on? 2. Which purchases from the past year have brought you genuine, lasting satisfaction versus temporary status boosts? 3. Whose financial opinion are you most concerned with, and why does their approval matter to you? 4. What financial goals would you pursue if you weren't comparing yourself to anyone else? This audit helps expose the gap between your authentic values and your comparison-driven spending habits. Most people are shocked to discover how many of their financial decisions are motivated by how they'll be perceived, rather than what actually brings them joy or security. The next step is implementing what behavioral economists call comparison blockers, practical strategies that short-circuit the comparison cycle. These include techniques like unfollowing social media accounts that trigger financial inadequacy, creating spending pre-commitment devices, like waiting 72 hours before any purchase over a certain amount, and developing personal financial benchmarks based on your own progress rather than others' achievements. One powerful approach is the financial finish line exercise, where you actually define what enough means to you across different categories. What's your definition of a sufficient home, car, vacation, or wardrobe? By explicitly defining these finish lines, you create mental permission to stop the endless upgrade cycle once you've reached your personally meaningful targets. I've seen remarkable transformations when people shift from comparison-based financial planning to values-based planning. A study of individuals who made this shift showed they not only reported greater financial satisfaction, but actually accumulated 23% more wealth over a 5-year period. When you stop spending to impress others and align your money with your authentic values, you naturally preserve more capital for things that create lasting financial security. Social media platforms have become particularly problematic amplifiers of this bias. The algorithms are literally designed to show you content that makes you feel inadequate, so you'll engage more and see more ads. Each time you feel that twinge of financial envy while scrolling, remember that you're experiencing a deliberately engineered psychological trigger designed to separate you from your money. The most powerful antidote is practicing financial mindfulness, becoming aware of when comparison is driving your decisions, and consciously redirecting your attention to your personal financial journey. This doesn't mean never buying nice things or enjoying your money. It means ensuring those purchases are aligned with your authentic values, rather than a desperate money scripts, your childhood financial programming. Just when you've started practicing financial mindfulness, there's a deeper force controlling your money decisions. Those financial choices you believe you're making with full awareness? They're actually being directed by hidden scripts installed in your brain during childhood, and they're silently determining your financial future in ways you've never imagined. Have you ever wondered why some people can't hang on to money no matter how much they earn? Or why others obsessively save every penny, even when they have plenty? These behaviors aren't random personality quirks. They're the result of what financial psychologists call money scripts. Money scripts are unconscious beliefs about finances that were programmed into your brain before you could even tie your shoes. Think about it. By the time you were 7 years old, your brain had already formed powerful associations about what money means, how it works, and whether you deserve to have it. Remember all those casual comments your parents made about money when you were little? We can't afford that. Money doesn't grow on trees. Rich people are greedy. Those weren't just throwaway phrases. They were programming sessions for your developing brain. Each time you heard these messages, they dug deeper neural pathways that would guide your financial behaviors decades later. What makes money scripts so dangerous is that they operate completely below your conscious awareness. You're making financial decisions every day based on childhood programming you don't even remember receiving. It's like someone installed secret software on your financial operating system, and you've been running it your entire adult life without ever seeing the code. Financial psychologists have identified 4 main categories of money scripts that silently guide our behaviors. The first is money avoidance, the belief that money is bad or that you don't deserve it. People with this script often unconsciously sabotage their financial success because deep down they associate wealth with negative qualities. The second script is money worship, the belief that more money will solve all your problems and that you can never have enough. This script leads to an endless pursuit of income that never actually delivers the promised happiness. Then there's money status, using money to define your self-worth and position in society. This script drives people to make financial decisions based on appearances rather than actual needs or values. The final script is money vigilance, being overly cautious and secretive about money. While this can promote saving and frugality, extreme vigilance can prevent healthy spending and enjoyment of resources. What's truly fascinating is how powerful these early scripts are. Research shows that your money scripts can predict your income, net worth, and financial behaviors more accurately than your education level. Think about that. The casual phrases your parents repeated about money have more influence on your wealth than the degree hanging on your wall. Let me give you an example. Sarah grew up hearing her parents say, "Money doesn't grow on trees," and "we can't afford that," constantly. Her parents weren't actually poor, they were middle class, but they had inherited a scarcity mindset from their own parents who lived through the Great Depression. As an adult, Sarah became an accomplished attorney, making over $200,000 a year. Yet she lived in constant financial anxiety. Whenever she received a bonus or unexpected windfall, she would suddenly find ways to spend it all within weeks. She bought things she didn't need and lent money to friends who never repaid her. When Sarah worked with a financial therapist, she discovered something shocking. She was subconsciously uncomfortable having too much money in her account. Her childhood programming had created a financial set point that she unconsciously maintained. Whenever she exceeded that set point, her money avoidance script kicked in, driving behaviors that would bring her back to her financial comfort zone. These scripts can manifest in countless ways. If you heard rich people are greedy as a child, you might find yourself avoiding promotions or sabotaging business opportunities. If your parents constantly fought about money, you might avoid looking at your finances altogether. If you were praised for saving every penny, you might struggle to enjoy your money even when you have plenty. The real danger is that these scripts create self-fulfilling prophecies. If you unconsciously believe, "I'll never be good with money," you'll likely make decisions that confirm that belief. Your script becomes reality not because it's true, but because it's directing your behavior like an invisible puppeteer. But here's the good news. Once you identify your money scripts, you can rewrite them. The first step is self-reflection. Think about your earliest memories of money. What did your parents say about wealth? How did they react to financial topics? What messages were repeated in your household? Pay attention to your emotional reactions to financial situations. Do you feel guilty when you spend on yourself? Anxious when you check your bank account? Suspicious of financial opportunities? These emotional responses are often clues pointing to your underlying scripts. One powerful technique for changing these patterns is what financial therapists call script flipping. This involves consciously identifying your childhood money messages and creating new empowering beliefs to replace them. For example, if your script is "money is the root of all evil," you might flip it to "money is a tool that can be used for good or evil, depending on the user." If your script is "I don't deserve wealth," you might replace it with "I create value for others and deserve to be compensated fairly." The key is to practice these new scripts daily until they become stronger than the old programming. This might involve creating affirmations, journaling about healthy money beliefs, or even working with a financial therapist who specializes in money psychology. Let's look at how script flipping transformed one person's financial life. James grew up in a household where his father constantly said, "People like us don't invest in the stock market." His family viewed investing as gambling and believed it was only for the wealthy elite. As an adult, James had a good job as an engineer, but kept all his money in savings accounts. Despite understanding the mathematical benefits of investing, he felt a strong emotional resistance whenever he tried to buy stocks or mutual funds. Through script flipping, James identified his childhood programming and created a new money script. Investing is a tool that people at all income levels can use to build wealth responsibly. He started small, investing just $100 per month while repeating his new script. Over time, the emotional resistance faded. 5 years later, James had built a six-figure investment portfolio and reduced his financial anxiety significantly. By consciously rewriting his money script, he changed both his behavior and his financial trajectory. Your money scripts might be deeply embedded, but they aren't permanent. Your adult brain has the power to recognize these patterns and create new, healthier financial beliefs. The first step is bringing awareness to these unconscious programs running in the background of your financial life. Tonight, try this simple exercise. Write down 3 sayings about money you heard repeatedly as a child. Then ask yourself how these messages might be influencing your current financial behaviors. Just bringing these scripts into your conscious awareness starts to reduce their power over you. The sunk cost fallacy. Breaking free from our childhood money scripts is just the beginning. There's another invisible force silently draining your bank account right now. Have you ever held on to a failing investment simply because you've already put thousands into it? Or kept paying for subscriptions you barely use? This isn't just poor decision-making. It's a psychological trap your brain falls into, called the sunk cost fallacy. And it might be costing you thousands without you even realizing it. The sunk cost fallacy is that nagging voice in your head saying, "But I've already invested so much." It's the mental trap that keeps you throwing good money after bad, simply because you've already committed resources to a particular decision. Think about that gym membership you've been paying for months but never use. Or that stock that keeps declining while you keep holding, hoping it'll bounce back someday. What makes this mental block so dangerous is how it operates just beneath your conscious awareness. When you've already invested time, money, or emotional energy into something, your brain becomes irrationally committed to that path, even when all evidence suggests you should cut your losses and move on. This psychological trap manifests in countless ways across your financial life. Maybe you're still paying for streaming services you watched once 6 months ago. Or perhaps you're keeping a failing side business running simply because you've already spent thousands getting it started. The average household wastes approximately $1,200 annually on subscriptions and services they don't actually use, all because canceling feels like admitting defeat. But the sunk cost fallacy extends far beyond just unused Netflix subscriptions. It's the reason people hold on to terrible investments long after they should have sold. It's why businesses continue pouring resources into failing projects. And it's why so many of us stay in financial situations that are clearly not working. What makes this mental trap so difficult to escape is that it's deeply tied to our emotional relationship with money. Nobody wants to admit they made a poor financial decision. The pain of acknowledging a mistake feels worse than the pain of continuing to lose money gradually. So instead of selling that terrible stock pick that's down 30%, you convince yourself it will recover and potentially watch it drop another 30%. The psychology behind this is fascinating. When facing potential loss, your brain experiences something similar to physical pain. Brain imaging studies show that financial losses activate the same neural pathways as actual physical discomfort. Your brain literally treats financial loss as pain it wants to avoid at all costs, even if that means making irrational decisions that create even bigger losses down the road. This leads to what financial psychologists call the escalation of commitment phenomenon. Not only do you refuse to cut your losses, but you actually increase your investment in failing ventures. Think about a gambler who keeps betting more money to recoup losses, or an investor who doubles down on a failing position to lower their average cost basis. What starts as a small financial mistake can quickly snowball into a major financial disaster. I once worked with a client named Derek who had invested $15,000 in his friend's restaurant venture. When the business began struggling, Derek kept injecting more capital. First another $10,000, then $20,000 more. By the time the restaurant finally closed, he had lost over $50,000. When I asked why he kept investing, his answer was revealing. I had already put so much in, I couldn't just walk away. This trap creates a dangerous downward financial spiral. Each additional dollar you commit makes it psychologically harder to walk away, increasing the likelihood you'll commit even more resources later. The cycle continues until you either have a moment of clarity or run completely out of money. The sunk cost fallacy doesn't just affect major investment decisions. It influences day-to-day financial choices too. Those shoes you bought that hurt your rough feet but were too expensive to waste. The costly home repair project that keeps requiring more money but you can't abandon. All examples of how sunk cost thinking keeps you financially stuck. Even the most financially savvy people aren't immune. Warren Buffett, arguably the greatest investor of all time, admits to losing millions by holding on to textile manufacturer Berkshire Hathaway, long after it became clear the business was failing. His famous quote, "Should you find yourself in a chronically leaking boat, energy devoted to changing vessels is likely to be more productive than energy devoted to patching leaks," came from his own painful lesson with the sunk cost fallacy. So how do you break free from this mental trap? The answer lies in a technique financial psychologists call the fresh start decision method. This approach requires training yourself to evaluate financial choices based solely on their future potential, completely ignoring past investments. Here's how it works. When facing any financial decision about an existing investment or expense, ask yourself, if I didn't already own this investment subscription item, would I buy it today at its current price? If the answer is no, it's time to cut your losses and move on. This mental shift, focusing exclusively on future value rather than past costs, is surprisingly powerful. A study of investors who adopted this technique showed they outperformed their peers by nearly 3% annually, simply by becoming more willing to sell losing investments when appropriate. Another effective strategy is creating predetermined exit rules before making any investment. For example, deciding in advance that you'll sell any investment that drops by 15%, or reevaluate any subscription not used in 60 days. By establishing these rules beforehand, you remove the emotional decision-making that fuels the sunk cost fallacy. Think of it like installing financial guardrails. I advise my clients to conduct a subscription audit every 3 months. Create a spreadsheet of every recurring payment and honestly assess which ones truly add value to your life. For each one, ask, If this service costs twice as much, would I still pay for it? If the answer is no, it probably isn't providing enough value to justify keeping. The sunk cost fallacy becomes particularly dangerous when combined with identity. Once you start thinking of yourself as an investor in company X or a supporter of Project Y, walking away feels like abandoning part of your identity. This is why many people hold on to losing investments in their favorite companies or continue funding personal projects long after they should have walked away. To counter this, practice mentally separating your identity from your investments. Remind yourself that selling a losing stock doesn't make you a failure. It makes you a smart investor who knows when to cut losses and reallocate resources to better opportunities. Some of the world's most successful investors and entrepreneurs attribute their success not to picking winners, but to quickly abandoning losers. As Amazon founder Jeff Bezos puts it, if you double down on a bet and it starts not working, you need to revert, to back up. The smartest people are constantly revising their understanding, reconsidering a problem they thought they'd already solved. Case studies consistently show that individuals who recognize and address the sunk cost fallacy significantly improve their financial outcomes. One investor I worked with had held on to an underperforming mutual fund for over a decade, simply because he had already invested so much. After finally selling and reallocating to a broader market index, he saw his portfolio grow 17% more in the next 3 years than if he had continued his old strategy. The instant gratification bias. Even when we've managed to free ourselves from the sunk cost fallacy, there's a more fundamental psychological battle going on in our minds. What if I told you your brain is actually wired to make you poor? The reason might be simpler than you think. Your present self and future self are locked in a constant tug-of-war over your money. And your present self almost always wins. This mental block is called present bias, our tendency to value immediate rewards over future benefits, even when those future benefits are substantially larger. It's why so many of us will happily drop $6 on coffee today, but struggle to set aside $100 for retirement next month. The science behind this is fascinating and explains why achieving financial success requires more than just willpower. Brain scans reveal something truly shocking. Your brain processes thoughts about your future self using the same neural pathways it uses to think about complete strangers. That's right. To your brain, the 65-year-old version of you might as well be someone you've never met. This psychological distance creates a disconnect that makes saving money feel like you're giving your hard-earned cash to a stranger rather than to yourself. Think about that for a moment. Would you hand $500 to a random person on the street? Probably not. Yet when you choose not to contribute to your retirement account, you're essentially refusing to give money to the future version of yourself who will desperately need it. This disconnect explains why even financially savvy people often make decisions that undermine their long-term security. The problem gets worse when you consider how our environment is engineered to exploit this bias. Marketers know exactly how to target your present bias with buy now, pay later offers and subscription services that feel insignificant in the moment but add up to thousands over time. Every swipe of your credit card triggers a small dopamine hit that feels good now, while the financial impact remains abstract and distant. Let me share something that might change your perspective. A study participant named David, a 32-year-old marketing executive, was shown an age-progressed photo of himself at 70. Before seeing the image, David had been contributing just 3% to his 401k, despite earning a comfortable salary. After spending time with the image of his older self and writing a letter to this future David, his contribution rate jumped to 11% within 2 months. The researchers weren't surprised. This is a pattern they've seen repeatedly. The numbers paint a clear picture. Individuals who develop a stronger connection to their future selves save up to 78% more for retirement than those who don't. This isn't just a small adjustment. It's the difference between struggling and thriving in your later years. That 78% could translate to hundreds of thousands of dollars in additional retirement savings. This phenomenon creates a destructive pattern in our financial lives. We consistently choose small pleasures now over financial security later. The $15 daily lunch that could be $300 invested monthly. The upgraded car lease that feels necessary now but postpones homeownership by years. The vacation funded by credit cards that creates a debt cycle lasting far longer than the memories. Each decision seems reasonable in isolation, but together they create a life of financial instability. What makes this mental block particularly dangerous is that it often leads to regret. Unlike other cognitive biases that we might never recognize, present bias eventually catches up with us. I've worked with countless clients in their 50s and 60s who express painful regret about not saving more when they were younger. By then, they've lost decades of compound growth that can never be recovered. Consider how present bias might be affecting your financial decisions right now. Are you putting off opening that investment account because it doesn't feel urgent? Have you been meaning to increase your retirement contributions but keep finding reasons to wait until next month? Do you find yourself thinking, I'll start saving seriously once I get my next raise, the same thought you had after your last raise? These are all signs that present bias is at work in your financial life. But here's the good news. Once you recognize this pattern, you can develop strategies to overcome it. The most powerful approach is something I call future self visualization. This technique involves creating a tangible connection to your future self through several practical steps. First, use age progression technology, available through many free apps, to create realistic images of yourself at retirement age. Place these images where you'll see them regularly, as your phone background, on your refrigerator, or near your computer. Next, write a detailed description of your ideal retirement lifestyle. Where do you live? What does your daily routine look like? Who do you spend time with? The more vivid and specific these details, the more real your future self becomes in your mind. Some of my clients even create a name for their future self, like Retired Rebecca or Future Frank, and regularly ask, would Future Frank thank me for this decision? The most committed clients take this a step further by writing letters to their future selves. These aren't just feel-good exercises, they're rewiring your brain to recognize your future self as real and deserving of consideration. When you feel a stronger connection to your future self, saving money no longer feels like sacrifice. It feels like taking care of someone you care about. Another powerful technique is to create concrete rules that protect your future self from your present self's impulsive decisions. Automation is your best friend here. Setting up automatic transfers to investment accounts removes the opportunity for present bias to derail your plans. Some people adopt the pay-yourself-first approach, ensuring retirement and investment accounts get funded before any discretionary spending happens. For major purchases, implement a future value calculation. Before buying something expensive, calculate what that money would be worth if invested for your retirement instead. That $3,000 vacation might represent $15,000 or more in retirement funds, depending on your age and investment returns. This doesn't mean never enjoying yourself now, but it helps you make these trade-offs with full awareness of what you're giving up. Practicing delayed gratification in small ways can strengthen this mental muscle. Start with non-financial areas of your life. Waiting an extra day to watch the next episode of your favorite show, or saving a special dessert for tomorrow. These small exercises build the neural pathways that make larger financial delayed gratification possible. Remember, overcoming present bias isn't about denying yourself all present pleasures. It's about making conscious choices rather than defaulting to immediate gratification. The goal is balance, enjoying life now while ensuring your future self isn't left to deal with the consequences of short-sighted decisions. When clients implement these techniques, the results are remarkable. One client doubled her retirement contributions after 6 months of future self-visualization. Another finally paid off high-interest debt after naming his future self and considering how each spending decision would affect Senior Sam. These aren't isolated cases. The research consistently shows that strengthening your connection to your psychological wealth roadmap leads to better financial outcomes. Strengthening your connection to your future self works wonders. But what if I told you that's just the beginning? Your brain requires 5 distinct psychological transformations throughout your life to unlock true financial potential. And most people get stuck at phase 1, never graduating to the wealth mindsets that become crucial in later decades. Financial success isn't just about mastering investment strategies or budgeting techniques. It's about adopting the right psychological approach for your current life stage. Using outdated mental frameworks is like trying to run modern software on an obsolete operating system. It simply won't work efficiently. Think about it. Would you use the same workout routine at 60 that you used at 20? Of course not. Yet most people try to apply the same financial psychology throughout their entire lives, wondering why they keep hitting walls with their money. Let me walk you through the critical psychological shifts required in each decade of your financial journey. The roadmap most financial advisors never share because they're too focused on products instead of your financial psychology. In your 20s, the key mental shift is from short-term thinking to growth psychology. Young adults often struggle with complexity aversion and procrastination, which prevents them from taking advantage of their greatest asset, time. When you're young, you might find yourself avoiding investments because they seem risky or complicated. But this is precisely when you should be embracing calculated risk. A client in her early 20s initially kept all her extra money in a savings account because investing seemed too risky. After working on her risk tolerance psychology, she started with small investments that grew her comfort level. 6 months later, she had tripled her investment contributions and established automatic transfers that would potentially add hundreds of thousands to her retirement compared to her original path. The 20s are when you need to train your brain to see volatility as opportunity rather than danger. This doesn't mean reckless behavior. It means understanding that your longer time horizon allows you to weather market fluctuations that would be devastating to someone nearing retirement. As you enter your 30s, the required mental shift changes dramatically. Now you need to transition from comparison-based decisions to developing a personal values-based financial identity. This is when many people fall into the trap of measuring their success against peers rather than their own unique goals. Your 30s are when careers typically accelerate, families often form, and major purchases like homes become common. Without a clear values-based financial identity, you'll find yourself making decisions based on what others expect, rather than what serves your long-term vision. This shift is particularly challenging in the age of social media, where we're constantly bombarded with carefully curated glimpses of others' financial lives. A banking executive I worked with was making 6 figures in his 30s but felt constantly behind his peers. By developing his personal financial identity based on what truly mattered to him, time with family and travel, rather than status symbols, he redirected thousands of dollars monthly from luxury car payments to investments aligned with his actual values. The result wasn't just better finances, but significantly higher life satisfaction. Then comes your 40s, when earning potential typically peaks. This decade requires perhaps the most challenging psychological transition, from scarcity to abundance thinking. After decades of careful budgeting and saving, many successful 40-somethings struggle to shift gears into strategic risk-taking when they're actually in their prime position to do so. The 40s scarcity to abundance shift is critical because this is when wealth-building opportunities often expand. Income is higher, your career is established, and you likely have valuable connections. Yet many people continue operating with the same cautious financial psychology that served them when they were just starting out. One business owner in her mid-40s continued to run her company with the same cash conservation mentality she needed when starting up, despite now having substantial reserves. This prevented her from making strategic investments in growth opportunities. After working on abundance psychology, she expanded her business through calculated investments that doubled her revenue within 18 months. As you reach your 50s, the psychological shift becomes even more pronounced. Your financial mindset needs to evolve from pure accumulation psychology to preservation and legacy thinking. This doesn't mean stopping growth entirely, but it does mean starting to think seriously about how to protect what you've built and how you want your wealth to benefit others. Many 50-somethings find this transition particularly difficult because their identity has become so intertwined with wealth accumulation. The metrics they've used to measure success for decades, portfolio growth, income increases, net worth milestones, suddenly need to be balanced with new considerations around wealth preservation and distribution. A physician in his early 50s struggled with this transition despite having accumulated significant wealth. His entire self-image was built around seeing his investment accounts grow each year. Through focused work on legacy psychology, he eventually developed a comprehensive wealth transfer plan that aligned with his values and gave him a new sense of purpose beyond just accumulation. Finally, in your 60s and beyond, your financial psychology needs to complete its evolution from wealth building to wealth distribution. This shift is often emotionally challenging as it requires confronting mortality and redefining your relationship with money entirely. The distribution phase psychology involves complex questions. How much can you safely spend? How will you feel seeing account balances potentially decrease? How do you want your money to impact others after you're gone? These questions aren't just financial, they're deeply psychological. A retired executive I worked with found herself paralyzed by anxiety despite having more than enough saved for retirement. She couldn't bring herself to spend from her portfolio after decades of saving. Through deliberate psychological work, she developed a permission structure for enjoying her money, including establishing specific accounts designated for guilt-free spending on experiences with her grandchildren. What makes these transitions so challenging is that each requires dismantling psychological frameworks that served you well in previous phases. The risk tolerance that helped you build wealth in your 20s needs modification as you approach retirement. The abundance mindset that helped you maximize opportunities in your 40s needs tempering with preservation thinking in your 50s. Many people get stuck at their most comfortable psychological stage, continuing to apply outdated mental frameworks to new financial challenges. The result is suboptimal decisions that can cost hundreds of thousands in missed opportunities or unnecessary risks. So how do you know which psychological blocks are most affecting you right now? That's where the financial psychology audit comes in. A systematic assessment of your financial belief systems, emotional patterns around money, and potential mental blocks specific to your current life stage. This audit helps identify which outdated psychological frameworks you might be applying to your current financial situation. Are you a 40-something still operating with the scarcity mindset of your 20s? A 50-something taking risks appropriate for a 30-year-old? The audit pinpoints these misalignments and provides targeted strategies to evolve your financial psychology. We've talked about psychological blocks, financial strategies, and the numbers, but let me tell you the most important thing I've learned after years in this space. Knowledge alone doesn't transform finances. Mindset does. According to the Intuit Financial Literacy Survey, only 57% of Americans are financially literate, but literacy without psychological readiness rarely translates to action. As financial psychologist Brad Klontz perfectly explains, people feel embarrassed. I think that's the biggest barrier to financial wellness. They don't want to think about it. They don't want to talk about it. This shame keeps so many of us financially stuck, afraid to take the first step. So here's your challenge. Pick just one mental block we've discussed today and tackle it this week. Remember this truth. When you change how you think about money, you change how money responds to you. Your financial freedom starts between your ears, not in your wallet. What mental block is holding you back?